So back in 2022, there was some talk about Sony possibly relaunching the PSP. From what we understand as of right now, that has been shelved. And I have some articles pulled up here, but you know how it is. I got the turn off your ad blocker bullshit. Um, but it seems as if Sony very well could be moving forward with some kind of PSP and what Sony could have learned from the PSP and the PS Vita, right? I just wanted to throw my opinion into the ring on like what Sony should really be doing. Uh, so a lot of the mock-ups that we see are pretty lame and unrealistic to what the modern climate of consumerism is looking like. When the PSP initially launched, the market was very different. You had things like the Game Boy Advance DS. Game Boy was just like the portable gaming device, and people had PSPs, but for that time period, the PSP needed to be passively cooled. It needed to work in hot environments. It needed to work in cold environments. It had physical media. There were a lot of things that were involved in that made the PSP both something that is super interesting and revolutionary, but also of its time. Same thing happened with the PS Vita. PS Vita was not very popular here in the States, but it was popular overseas in Japan. And you can find different makes and models all over the place. Same as the PS TV. That was another device that was popular elsewhere. Actually, funny story. I remember my buddy bought a PS TV, and we had a PS3 and a PS4, and he would use the PS3 remote play feature in his room, and like he didn't buy a PS3, instead he just connected it to the PS3, so he through the PS TV, and then he bought a Vita and he did the same thing. He used the Vita all the time. I actually enjoyed my Vita quite a bit. I had a Vita as well. I like Gravity Falls on it. I can't wait for the emulator to Vita 4K to come out. It's gonna be super cool. But anyways, a PSP in the modern era, especially with consumers looking at things like the ROG Ally, the Steam Deck, and a lot of these much smaller, more appropriate gaming laptops. You know, Asus has quite a few, whether you're okay with Asus still or not. MSI is another one. They are coming out with a pretty solid launch of laptops that can do gaming. And this is the part where you say, well, Ian, the PSP is a Sony product. They're going to launch it with Sony software. They're going to launch it locked out. It's going to be for specific stuff. And sure, that's true. But the problem is, as soon as Sony decides to bring something to market, there's going to be teams probing it for information to then emulate it elsewhere if they choose to lock it down. The time for proprietary is kind of ending. A lot of people are getting wiser and smarter to how these kinds of things work. They're changing inputs to be with different connectors. We're seeing USB connectors on Game Boy or GameCube controllers to the Wii. There's a lot of stuff that people are modding and manipulating and changing to work the way they want to. And if Sony wants to enter a space right now, especially with the bomb that the Steam Deck did drop with its full repairability, upgradability, it has so many different mods. It has different shells that you could put it in. There's 3D printable shells. There's a lot there that Sony needs to do right, and that is to provide a product for people who aren't interested in something like the Steam Deck, but not lock it down to a point where there's nothing on it. The smartest thing that Sony could do right now, especially with the PSP moving forward, is probably modernize the cell phone or the gaming cell phone, uh, putting the gaming first and foremost in the product, but allowing it to have a 5G connection, Wi-Fi connection, as well as cellular, as that would really be the highlight of the product. That's something that like a Steam Deck does not have. You have to hotspot your Steam Deck in order for it to work correctly with internet on the go. So having a intuitive design that will accept a SIM card and be available to add to, say, a Verizon plan, alongside a cell phone. Like if you buy a Sony Xperia, you'll get this new Sony PSP. Say it's $1,000 bundle. You're getting a pretty top of the line cell phone, and you're going to be getting a pretty top of the line PSP. This could be the entryway into creating a new market where Sony could thrive, and developing and delivering a product like a tablet and a cell phone in the PSP moniker could be huge for the entire company, especially if they open up their doors to open source, Linux, big picture modes, separate launching. That kind of stuff is really going to be what sets Sony apart as the big dogs on campus who want to provide a experience that is worth our time. But as it stands right now, my argument is there really is no point for Sony to produce something like a PSP Vita 2.0. It's looking like we might see some information on this going into fall of 2023. Rumors abound. You can check out Reddit. You can check out some of the leaks, some of the Sony talks from like the Japanese articles and things like that. There are plenty of articles discussing this, but my personal opinion is be weary of something like this. As we know, PS5 is selling well, but it has a lot of flaws. Being extremely locked out and extremely locked down, hyper proprietary. Sony being somebody who is very much in the same vein as Nintendo in terms of like anti-archival, not releasing their products on PC, uh, destroying opportunities for, say, Bloodborne, for instance. Like we've been hopefully we'll get a Bloodborne announcement soon for Bloodborne Remastered or something, or Bloodborne to PC, Ragnarok to PC, something. But the climate clearly states that now is not really the time for Sony to be doing much of anything. Trust in them is pretty low in the heavier, more opinionated space of people who build and create things for themselves. The PSP might not be what a lot of people are looking for. But if they can release something that does 720p, 60 FPS, maintains a lot of their previous library, brings back their PSP minis, their PS2s on the go titles, and things like that, or even if it's something with an Android shell, it could be good. There is a lot of opportunity for it to be good. Steam very well could release something here in the near future regarding Steam on mobile devices as a um, gaming platform against, say, Google Play. Uh, as you know, Google owns the Android software, so well, if we'll see if Google decides to be anti-competitive. But with Yuzu now available for download through the Play Store, it seems like Google's taking the side of pro emulation and archival. So it might be very possible that they work together with Steam to release like the Google Arcade. These are a lot of extreme situations. These kind of corporate collaborations aren't very often, but phones are getting more and more and more and more powerful, and we need to understand that we're coming to a point where PCs are going to be getting smaller and smaller and smaller and smaller and still retain a level of speed and graphical capabilities to allow them to play games. Now, you're not going to be getting peak performance, but you might be getting good performance, and you can dock it up and get better performance that way, etc., similar to how the Switch worked. So PSP has a lot of room to look at the environment and take into consideration all of it. I think the best thing that they could do is do something like a PlayStation Vio portable, bring back the Vio name, and focus your department into a more open source, working with the community aspect, because here in America, at least, that seems to be leading the charge. Uh, I myself am getting absolutely tired of working with Windows 11. I really want to go to Linux. And I feel like a PSP running Linux, running a solid graphics card, like a really high-end Snapdragon would probably do it as long as it's properly cooled. But even then, with things like the Steam Deck having a Ryzen chip in it and having onboard graphics that does what it does, it is looking more and more possible that Sony could utilize the same technique and slimline it to a way that is, 5G acceptable, cellular available, because the disruption of the Steam Deck was more of a product launch into a who knows what market, and it did very well. I still to this day recommend Steam Decks, especially if you're looking for something on a budget. They're great. They're dockable. You can set it up as a regular computer if you choose. I use mine as a drawing tablet. I use mine for playing games. I use it for playing emulators. I use it for all kinds of stuff. I've used it for joining Discord calls on the go, all kinds of stuff. But yeah, let me know what you guys think. Do you think there is an opportunity here for PlayStation to drop the PlayStation Portable Vita 2.0? Do you think Sony will absolutely fuck up a launch like that, like they've done with the PS3 and the Linux, the PlayStation 2 Linux, the PlayStation 2 hard drives? Are they gonna screw it up again? PlayStation 5s are just dying; they're overheating. It's a problem. I don't think there's a lot of market for Sony to be releasing something like that. They've clearly not been hyper successful with the Xperia, especially here in the States, within my opinion. I've had a Sony Xperia. I have a L1, and I like it. It was a great phone when I got it, but since then I've moved on to the Nord product line. I would love to go back to Xperia if they had a device, even if it's a cell phone that you clip into a case, that in that case has the mouse or the controls. Something's got to be done if they're gonna try this. But I would probably still recommend to people to look at things like the ROG phone if they're looking for a mobile gaming device alternative to, say, a Steam Deck, something smaller. But you could always still even go to like an Aya Neo, a ROG Ally, a Razer phone that you mod, a OnePlus Nord that you mod. There's a lot of other options. So the Xperia really needs to, or the PSP Xperia, whatever it's going to be called, really needs to do something that's disrupting the market, which I just don't see Sony having the balls to do. But I would love for them to prove me wrong. Anyways, guys, let me know what you guys think. Subscribe, check out my other channels if you're in. I'll see you guys in the next one. Later.